TVOT.
Add a little bit. Add a little bit. Okay.
Very nice, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
So good afternoon, folks. I'm really proud to have a number of great speakers with me today. And I've chosen representatives from 4 interdependent fields providing different perspectives. We have a designer, we have a researcher, a CEO, and an ITV pioneer. So I'm going to introduce them one at a time so you can meet them. And let's start with, can I get this mic brought up here? Thank you. Excellent. So first up, please join me in welcoming each of them one at a time, and we'll start with Mike Bloxham. Mike is Vice President, Insights and Research, Trendline Interactive. Mike Bloxham has worked in media, research, and consulting for over 20 years, advising multinational corporations, media owners, and government agencies on strategic marketing and communications issues on an international basis. Mike has extensive attitudinal and behavioral research experience and has worked on key projects in interactive TV and emerging media. Very impressive. Most of you may know Mike for his involvement with Ball State University from 2003 to 2011. Mike was Director Insight and Research at Ball State University's Center for Media Design. He has long been featured speaker at marketing new media research conferences internationally. He also writes regularly for Media Magazine and Media Post. Welcome, Mike. Thank you very much. Next up, we have our designer, Olivier Lecour. Olivier is Studio Designer Director for NDS Group Limited. NDS creates technologies and applications that enable pay TV operators to securely deliver digital content to set-top boxes, DVRs, PCs, mobile, and other multimedia devices. Their middleware, security, and user interface products are deployed to nearly 200 million devices worldwide. Very impressive. Olivier Lecour is responsible for NDS Studio Design Department based in France. Since 2002, Olivier has played an essential role in developing and strengthening software and hardware design activities for the company. Olivier's design team is responsible for the multi-award-winning NDS Snowflake user interface. Prior to joining NDS, Olivier spent 7 years as a TV show director and web and broadcast design director for a large number of French and worldwide TV channels. Welcome, Olivier. Batting third in our lineup is our CEO, Joe Gillespie. Joe is President and Chief Executive Officer of Zuve. Welcome, Joe. Joe Gillespie has more than 20 years of experience in operations, sales, and marketing, spanning online, television, and events and print media. Joe's role at Zuve charges him with driving strategic vision and all operations for the unique mobile marketing platform company. Most recently, Joe served as Executive Vice President of CBS Interactive Technology and News, which includes CBSNews.com, CNET.com, CNETnews.com, and Download.com. One of my favorites, by the way. Joe joined CNET Networks in 2004 as Chief Marketing Officer. Prior to joining CNET Networks, Joe was COO at Vulcan Ventures Tech TV. I met Joe early in his career when we both worked for the progressive Ziff Davis publishing empire, where Joe was EVP of Corporate Sales and Marketing. Excuse me, Joe. There's more. That's where he spent the early part of his career in sports media with CBS Sports, NBC, and Sports Information Database, Inc. Welcome, Joe. Thank you very much for participating today. And then rounding out the presentation for today is a name that you're very familiar with, Mr. John P. Roberts, as our ITV pioneer. Welcome, John. You may not have heard him walk in here and say, the old guy. John is currently SVP Digital Content and Cross-Platform Entertainment at The Hub, the new multi-platform joint venture programming network from Discovery and Hasbro. In addition to providing product vision, John is responsible for ensuring that all digital content reflects the network's objectives, creative vision, and brand. Prior to The Hub, John served as head of digital media at Lucasfilm Limited, where he was responsible for developing the strategy for Lucasfilm's digital media initiatives and coordinating synergistic collaboration across business units, including Lucasfilm, LucasArts, ILM, which I think is Industrial Light and Magic, and SkySound. Robert's extensive media industry knowledge stems from his work with numerous companies, including the Game Show Network, Vulcan Programming, Universal Studios, and News Corporation. He's also a 4-time Emmy Award nominee in interactive television and recipient of the ITV Leadership Award from ITVT. Thank you very much, ITVT folks. Welcome, gentlemen, and let's get started. Okay, I should have been progressing this presentation while we were talking, and I did not, unfortunately. But can I get some interactivity here? Nothing's happening at this moment. Tech support, tech support. I see a little digital display here, but I'm not getting any advancing going from this wireless. Anyone? Shall we do hand puppets? Great, great. Now those would have been going as we went through here, so you could see their pretty faces and their categories. But the presentation is called A Moment in Time, and I wanted to focus on that little red dot right in that presentation. Keep your eye there and watch what happens. So, right now, it's all about numbers. It's a numbers game. You heard all these other panels talking about how many subscribers, how many boxes, how many technologies, how many programming networks, how many interactive sessions, on and on. It's the numbers. Well, how many consumers are there? There's 91 million households here in the US doing digital subscriptions, and this is sourced from Merrill Lynch. That's growing to 107 million households by 2015. That's their estimate. Pretty interesting number. Nice growth there. Let's hope people go back into homes. But it's also about the money. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the money as well. And in terms of money, there's $300 billion circulating around in this revenue for for television in general. There's $200 billion in the US internet in terms of e-commerce on the internet. Again, very impressive numbers, and that's why you're all here. You're trying to get a piece of that pie. So 131 billion of that is the US pay TV market. The other 169 billion is advertising. And the reason I have the wireless here, I want to come over here and show you that television advertising, that's 56 billion. That's the regular broadcast television. And then there's internet, newspaper, direct mail, etc. So where's interactive in all of this? Well, here's where it comes in. This 169 billion, there's TV and other in there. We talked about 56 of that being television. But when you see the growth going from 2010 to 2015 that Merrill Lynch is predicting, guess what? That AA up there, that's advanced advertising. That's where the growth is coming from. The other two numbers are pretty much flat in that 5-year period. Advanced advertising is where it is. Interactivity. Yes? Not necessarily. The biggest portion, $11.58 billion, is addressable advertising. That is, making decisions about what advertising gets in front of what eyeballs at what time on what channel. Has nothing to do with interactivity. The others, interactive TV, dynamic ads on VOD, long-form VOD, that's where you start to get into some interactivity. My challenge to this group is reverse those numbers. Make interactive the much more important piece of this pie. Right now, it's not, at least according to the projections. And one of the reasons the projections aren't so great is that we haven't come up with the compelling reasons for advertisers, programmers, and consumers to engage with this. In asking 104 national advertisers, this was asked by the Association of National Advertisers in the Forrester study from, let's see, this was 2009, asking about 2010 spending. Where are you going to put your money? Most of it's going into ads in online videos and online TV shows. Only 28% growth was predicted for interactive advertising during programs. Again, the numbers are backwards for this industry. Now, it's also about people. We talked about the numbers, we talked about the dollars, but people are very much an important part of this. So back to that dot. If you look at that blue line as media viewing across time, that little dot there is all about viewing. Viewing across this time, the little blue bars represent ad breaks. That little dot is your moment. It's when you want to connect with that consumer and create some interactivity. However, levels of interest go up and down during program. Unfortunately, most of the interest goes down during advertising from research with consumers over years. You're trying to solicit them at a weak point. Most of them have peeled off. I shouldn't say most. Many have peeled off. but certainly their interest level is peeled off. You have to get them at that moment. Putting this into a landscape, there's an engagement that needs to occur. That engagement is the interactive application enticing the user to become active. They've been passively watching television, you want to make them active. You want them to become a user. You want them to transact. However, along the way there are distractions. Distractions could have been some other program pulled them away. It could have been that some other advertisement sent them off to a third-party device to do something else. All sorts of distractions happen in the home. That moment in time may be slipping away from you. In addition, there are lots of distractions. It's not just about distractions while you're watching television. It's while you're doing all these other things. It could be coming from the laptop, from the smartphone, from the tablet. All of those things are moments in time that you're trying to interact with that consumer. It does, however, create an opportunity, and this panel is going to talk to you today about the opportunities that come out of this type of environment of multi-screen. If you look at the little white sections in those bars, those represent levels of engagement. Laptop, you can go for a pretty long time with an engagement because it's a very, very facile tool. However, on a television set, if you're using a remote control, whether it's a push-button remote control, or as you just saw in the previous presentation, a gesture-based remote control, it's somewhat limited. Tablet, pretty flexible. You can do a lot there, so you might get a longer engagement. Now, if you're on that one piece there, the television set, and you're asking the consumer to engage in a 30-second spot, and it took them 10 seconds out of 30 seconds to go find the remote control and put it in their hands, then you're racing with them to try and get them to read the screens that come up for interactivity. How much time do they have left to actually go interactive? Probably very little at that point. Where are they going to be? They're probably going to be frustrated to some degree. If you have to tear that application down because you went back to programming or you went to a new ad, they're not going to come back again. That was a frustrating experience. So you have to be careful about what do you choose to do what. What type of presentation device, what type of interactive environment is right for that interactive moment. Laptop has a keyboard, that's great. TV, some kind of remote. Smartphone, keyboard with touch. A tablet, fully touch. Make your decisions based upon the device that you have available to you. Avoid the frustration. Leave them happy. So, I'm going to turn to each of our presenters here and ask them to speak for a moment or two about their perspective on the world. And we're going to start with Mike Bloxham, our consumer researcher. And Mike asked us to put up a very compelling image for his conversation.
Less a compelling image than an excuse not to have to write a great deal. When I sent this chart through to Gerard, I said, look, I can speak to this for about a minute or I can speak to it for about an hour. I can definitely speak to it for about an hour, but I promise not to. I probably can't speak to it for a minute, as anybody who knows me will testify, but I promise not to go much beyond that. Yeah, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for basically any form of communication. Take it back to the town crier, take it back to whatever you will. As soon as a piece of content, a story, an ad, whatever it may be, reaches its audience, there's an effect, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's something going out over social networks, fan pages that get put up outside of the control of the content owner, the originator of the content, it happens. It's our job in the communications industry to understand as much as we possibly can about what motivates people to respond. Having seen something, respond well or respond badly. And down which channels? What are they able to do down which channels? What do they choose to do down different channels? How far does the ripple effect of any given piece of content actually go? And where can we go with it? Which of these elements can we actually plant and control? Which of them do we allow to foster, to grow? I was actually talking with Will Kreth earlier on outside. So perhaps one of the best examples of the perpetuation of a content franchise is Star Trek. If the Trekkies hadn't existed outside of Gene Roddenberry and the machine of broadcast, well, we'd never have seen the Star Trek movies, we'd never have seen the resurrection of the franchise and everything that involved. So it's allowing this stuff to take root naturally, but coming back and leveraging it. Now, when we talk about interactivity, when we talk about second screen and so forth, inevitably, we have to understand what is going to drive engagement. It's not the technology. The technology facilitates certain actions. It facilitates behavior, but the desire has to be there. That desire is obviously initially driven by a response to the content, to the story. But Amy Viles summed it up to my mind very well this morning in Rick Howe's session talking about ACR. How are we going to communicate to people exactly what the offering is? How are we going to prompt and nurture sustained behavior, which is going to make it more than a flash in a pan? And I'll give an illustration to both illustrate the point behind the metaphor, but also to make a secondary point about data. Because data is content too, when it's put out as research. A number of people have already referred to the fact that 60% of TV viewers use the web while watching TV. Well, that's a kind of fact. It's actually misstated. It's not true, not at face value. Semantically, that phrase tells you that at any given time, 60% of the viewing public are using the web while watching TV. They're not. If you look at Nielsen and their 3-screen report, which is probably the most reliable ongoing measure of this, which is electronically gathered across TV, across cell phones, and across tablets, PC, they say that 60% of the audience is using the web while watching television at least once a month. That is a very different picture. And those are people aged 2 and above. That doesn't mean it's not happening, but it also doesn't mean the way it gets reported out and what it implies, that 60% of the viewing public at any time are doing that. I also found another study while I was sitting in here earlier, come out of the UK based on survey data, where you ask people what they're doing, notoriously unreliable when it comes to their media time and multitasking, but people actually said, they answered the survey in such a way that the initiators of the survey concluded also that 60% of the viewing public were using the web while watching television, but they said their 60% was once or twice a week. So there you have a scenario where 60% doesn't always equal 60%. But it's that scenario about you don't always control what happens as soon as you put the content out there. Our job is to understand what it really means to people and how to engage them in a way which is sustainable and ultimately, of course, profitable.
Thank you, Mike. Olivier Lecour, the product designer. Your perspective?
I'm looking at things from a user experience perspective, actually, being a designer. And there are a few things that are very noticeable. First of all, people are not using the products that we develop. It's a fact. If you look at how many features they are using on an everyday basis, worse than that, they are not even knowing that these features are existing. To be down to earth. So, having that in mind, I'm looking at the product, and it's very obvious that there are two reasons why they are either not using the device or not even knowing what the device can do. Is A, it's super complex. I mean, 45 buttons, remote control on average. What do you expect people to do with that, And on a more subjective area, it's ugly. It's not appealing. It's not an experience that you would, be keen to engage regarding the level of the benchmark, which is the Apple family, some kind of. So basically, there are two problems to be addressed. A is easiness of use. B is a better TV experience in terms of look and feel. This is what we've been addressed with Snowflake and the launch of SFR and Zone and this year with Liberty Global. We learned a few things out of that, and I'll be pleased to share the learnings.
Great. Here's your Snowflake presentation. Can we dim the house lights?
So it can look as kind of a dream, but it has been launched, okay?
Yeah, in fact, I was just going to point out the fact that I had the opportunity to see that presentation, see the live product in Paris, and then also go visit your friends at Zon in Portugal. It does look beautiful. It is sharp. It's crisp, not as fuzzy as we see here. Joe,
Thank
the
you, Gerard.
CEO.
So would you, could I just call upon you to advance, or?
Good idea.
Thank you very much. It's the right button, right?
Yep.
So I violently agree with everything Olivier just said. In particular, the idea around simplicity. Having spent most of my career trying to help consumers demystify technology, whether at PC Magazine or CNET, it always comes down to the use case and how simple we can make it. And when Gerard first told me about this panel, we talked a lot about multi-screen, and I was really wanted to make sure that we talked a lot too about the quality of the content experience. What is it that we're actually asking the user to engage on? So my challenge is to show you that we've actually built something at Zoom that's brilliantly simple, because Gerard has given me all of 3 minutes to explain what has taken 7 years and in excess of $40 million in venture capital money to get here. So
You can do it.
let me get right to it. So what is Zoov? Zoov, quite simply, is a brand new mobile namespace. We are now exclusively managing a new registry for all the major carriers in the US. Simply ** followed by anything in the English language, as few as 1 digit, as many as 15. We work across, again, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint. We work across every phone. Simply ask the user to simply call ** any vanity you can imagine. We start with an addressable market of over 270 million users. Our use case is frankly looking to drive a truck through the idea that SMS shortcodes are too complicated, they're not memorable, non-commonsensical numbers followed by more, to QR codes, don't work on radio, don't work on billboards, pass them at 60 miles an hour, and fewer than 2% of phones can actually use it. So there are a myriad of different applications for star codes. We're selling brands of all kinds, whether it's Unilever or retailers. It turns out that the early of adopters happen to be media brands of all kinds, in magazines, radio, and in particular in television. And we've actually recently signed deals with CBS. We're actually now airing on ABC, Good Morning America, and most recently we launched on ESPN. And what I'd like to do very simply and quickly is just show you 2 quick demonstrations to give you an idea of the use case, and then I'll shut up.
Can you dim the house lights again?
Aloha, and welcome to the Hawaii Five-0 Surf Club. We've just sent you a text. Click the link to see an exclusive Surf Club video clip and sign up for CBS local offers. Standard message and data rates apply. This call automatically disconnects.
So in this case, CBS Network decided they could use ** calling events to get people to register for the Surf Club for Hawaii Five-0. This actually ran last night in the final episode of the season. It got all of a 4-second call out at the end of the broadcast, right after the credits, and it generated several thousands of phone calls to the calling event. There's all sorts of other interesting behaviors I'll give you, but just keep in mind that what programmers are trying to do is how do we get users to engage, either get cool stuff like a coupon, a ringtone, or maybe register to some sort of buying local club, as in this case. The next example is ESPN, and in this case, keep in mind it's a bimodal experience. Simply call ** ESPN, and here we're actually going to download an app to the device. And what we love about this trick is that Zoov is a technology and IP that actually sits on the carrier switches. So it's at the SS7 operating system level for all you geeks out there. And what that means is that when you generate a ** calling event, we know the phone number that generated it, we know the handset that generated it, we know the carrier that generated it, and we know the tower data. So what that allows us to do for programmers and brands is allow them to personalize and target at scale. So in the case of ESPN, they have a fantasy baseball app that works on as many as 6 or 7 different phones. ** ESPN, we know it was an Apple phone, they go to the App Store for Apple. It was a Microsoft, they go to the Microsoft. So again, this example is ** ESPN.
Simply call ** ESPN. That's ** 3776 from your mobile phone.
So the last
Thank
thing,
you for
and I
calling
promise this is it.
** ESPN. Get closer to the game with the ESPN Fantasy Baseball app. We've just sent you a text to download the app. Manage your team on the go. Just click the link to get started. Message and data rates may apply. This call automatically disconnects.
So the thesis is twofold. Simplicity. Everybody knows how to make a phone call. There's nothing to download. Every phone has a dial pad on it. And we've obviously allowing brands to basically register their brand. It's not, 5566. It's ** ESPN or ** Coke. Beyond having what we think is a brilliantly simple use case in front end and UI, we've also built a very powerful ad platform. So by basically registering your code with Zoov, You get the lease on the code, and you get full access to a full-blown content management system and ad portal that allows you to do everything from track the number of calls you're generating, what your click-through rate is, and my favorite, actually change your content asset every hour on the hour, which is one of the reasons we're taking off actually for live broadcasters. And this just gives you a sense of the depth of the data that we supply. So I'm happy to be here, delighted actually to be here, and looking forward to talking more about what we've seen in terms of what's working from an early engagement standpoint.
Thanks very much, Joe. Controller? Thank you.
You bet.
All right, John, you're up.
I love this pioneer. Okay. So I've been doing this for a long time, actually, and I actually followed Mike's lead and did the one slide thing about, one cartoon that just says interactive TV today, Hamlet, to be or not to be. And I say that because sometimes I look at interactive just like that. When I first started getting involved in this was back in the day, oh God, it was 97, 98, when web TV was showing this demo. And of all the programs they could have picked to do a demo of what interactive TV would be like in the future, they picked a show called Moesha. And I don't know if you ever remember that. I think it was on UPN or something like that. And this was what was going on into all the studios. Let's show how we can do interactive TV with this show that had nothing to do with any interactivity. They were literally saying, so what color is Moesha's dress right now? Yellow. Wow, this is really engaging. And it was one of those things where I still thought it was kind of cool you could do anything like this. But at the time I was at Universal Studios, and I was able to arrange a meeting with, at the time Edgar Bronfman Jr. was, Seagram owned Universal. Dick Wolf from Law & Order came to it, and we showed this Moesha demo, which was almost embarrassing. And Dick Wolf afterwards goes, I would never want anyone touching, I'm going to quote him, my goddamn storyline. He's like, why would you wreck my existence of a show that I'm doing? You're shrinking my screen down, and you're literally taking this whole interactive experience to a whole other level about taking away from the story. And that's something that Brian has been talking about, Brian Seth Hurst, who's down here, about storytelling. And it really comes down to why I say to be or not to be is it comes back to what is the content that you want to make interactive. I had the luxury of 7 years being at Game Show Network where shows are inherently interactive and people scream at their TV set anyway. So we had a pretty easy time trying to make interactive television. We really focused more on the two-screen in the beginning where we had the TV set and hopefully the computer set-top box or computer or your laptop in the same room. Then we finally moved off to finally doing something with Oceanic Time Warner. We did single screen using just the remote control. Then we kind of jumped the interactive shark, I like to say, because we literally made everything interactive on our network. I mean, even if it was like a show like a dating game that had nothing to do with any interactivity, we were 24/7 interactive. But we learned a lot based on that. And I personally learned a lot more where you really have to look at the content and why you want to make it interactive. How are you engaging your audience and what is that ROI? Whether it's giving somebody a better experience, whether it is working with advertisers, we literally would make our advertising interactive. So when we went to commercial, we usually had one choice advertiser that was willing to pay a bigger CPM and sit there and make the commercial interactive using focus group stuff. We literally were able to bet 85% of our interactive audience would interact with the ad. So we saw some type of futuristic thing happening here, but at the same token, it was a little too early because we didn't have the iPad. We didn't have tablets that would allow you to have a lot more seamless interactivity. Watching Rick Howe's ITV Doctor panel today, I was like, wow, why? Where was this stuff 7 years ago when we could have done a lot more things? But that gets me excited now because there's so much more opportunity. But the key thing, if we want to make this industry move forward, it's coming up with the reasons of why do we want interactivity to be part of this. You can't always just take everything just for granted that someone wants to sit there and interact this. I was watching the Oscars this year, which was probably one of my 3 hours back afterwards. But one thing that ABC did that I thought was amazing was built this iPad app that really took you behind the scenes and let you have a little bit more of an interactive experience. That time it worked. But I've seen a lot of other shows that have tried this stuff that's just, it's watching paint dry, and they literally, just doesn't work. So I look forward to having this conversation with everybody here because I think there's a great opportunity in the industry right now, and I think the people in this room and in this conference are going to help make this all happen.
Thanks very much, Sean. We're going to go right into questions, and I'm going to move down into the audience because there want to be a combination of prepared questions and then questions from all of you. So the first one up here in terms of questions, is the single screen interactive too late to the game in a world where there's iPads, iPhones, and lots of interactive devices out there? Gentlemen, what do you think? Who's going to take it first? And by the way, short answers, mix it up. I want to get to some audience questions.
I'll jump in really quick. I don't think it's too late. I think it has to be what is the content you're doing. I'll go back to that. If it's single screen, you find that you have a lot less real estate to work with if you start making the TV screen interactive. So if it's simple stuff like polling, questioning, yes or no, easy to use the buttons, I don't think it's too late.
What we've learned from the launch of Snowflake is actually two basic things. A, people love the simplification of the remote control. So simplification is happening and it has to be right now. B, they loved the seamless approach, whatever the screens. And it has also impacts on the kind of sales that you can do on VOD, for instance. So it's not too late. It's about making it right now. To me?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a part of the scene, but single screen is no longer king of the hill. If it had moved forward faster earlier, maybe it would be now, and everybody else would be trying to take it on. But the reality is we're in a different ecosystem, and that means something that was being discussed this morning, how many standards do we need to have? Bottom line is you need to have as many standards as there are viable platforms, viable display devices. And viable, I mean, you're able to deliver a meaningful user experience, and viable insofar as you've got enough people willing to engage with you on that platform.
So simple and meaningful content, that can save the single screen experience. Joe, of course, you've got a business being built on the idea that it's multiple screens. You're taking advantage of the reach of television, you're downloading applications, you're creating experiences on these other devices. Single screen important to you, or you don't have a business in that, so let these guys have at it.
I think they're all spot on. It always comes down to the quality of the experience. And I remember when I got to the web, I learned terms like utilitarian value. I'm like, and we took that for granted at Tech TV because, like the Game Show Network, which I think is a great example of great engagement, there was a distance learning lean in that you could engage customers to do on Tech TV. So I think a lot of you have to kind of parse out what is the content. If it's storytelling and entertainment, I think single screen's got limited value. If it's truly lean-in informational programming, I think it has a tremendous amount of value.
Good point. Any questions from the audience we can jump into right away? Brian Sethurst, I knew you would come up on this one.
Well, I just want to ask, there's this generalization being made, and probably this goes back to Mike, but even that question, this is a generational question. This is a demographic lifestyle question. So what might be right for one show on a single screen and the generation that's watching that one show is entirely different for the generation that's 18 to 24. And so I want to ask, I can see, Joe, where your application is going to work across any demographic. But the other stuff, what's the consideration of what I refer to as the technographic? Because you can't I don't think you can generalize anymore. So how do you address that? Mike?
Brian, I absolutely agree. That's why you've got to be on all the platforms. And this brings up, I think, a really interesting proposition, because we look at audiences now, media buying terms, and they talk about lifestyle and they talk about demographics. Generally, when you're doing media buying, it comes back down to demographics, because that's a blunt instrument that the media industry has always used. But when you're talking about interactivity, you've also got to take into account the point about the platforms that are going to get most traction and where you're going to attract different types of audience. So it's a different kind of segmentation, almost by programming. You've got to say one program has these segments that are of any size and any significance. These are their behaviors. This is where, over time, we learn, we get more traction with different interactive propositions. This program has a different profile, different set of segments.
And does that go for content genre as well?
Question is, does that go to content genre as well? I suspect you will see patterns that will emerge across content genre. Then as you drill down to within specific program equities within that, you'll see shades of gray below the genre.
Well, one more prepared question here I want to move on to real quickly, and we'll come back to that. Which device is preferred for interacting with television? We're talking about the second screen. Which second screen, are you seeing any patterns in there in terms of which is preferred?
For what I'm seeing, it's definitely like the iPad's done an amazing job. Especially the people that are building on that. I think NBC and ABC have done really good jobs with the NBC Interactive app. I think the ABC Player as well. Grey's Anatomy has done some interesting things. I really think, for me, right now, that is my toy of choice right now.
So you asked me to talk about the CEO hat and the business implication. It always comes down to scale, folks. If you don't have meaningful numbers, you got nothing to sell. And interactive TV reminds me a lot of 1995, the early days of the internet, when we were trading dollars for dimes from TV to web. So the iPad is great, and all these devices are great, but they're rounding errors when you look at what the total audience size is and what the numbers look like from an engagement standpoint, and you really can't sell that. So the value proposition, sorry for the Zoom commercial, is we say, look, any phone, it doesn't matter. And the point is you can start with a large audience that can engage, because you got to drive scale. At the end of the day, if you're not driving scale, you can't monetize it, and you're not going to have the money from a development standpoint.
That's why you're here.
Well, if you look at TV as some kind of cloud-based application that you can access from any devices, the notion of first, second, or third screen is already challenged. And B, it's clear that depending the location, depending the time, and the market segment, any device is more relevant than another. So, voilà.
But I think to your point, though, I think you said, if you look at what's the I mean, what I'm looking at so far has been the user experience. Yes, I agree with you. You need to fish where the fish are and try to get that wide audience. But I think if I'm looking at the numbers, and I'd be interested to hear, Mike, about the numbers of tablets growing over the next few years, I think we will get that mass experience. So I think it's going to be important.
I think, it comes back to what is the call to action? What is the experience? If it's something which is very video rich, then a larger screen like a tablet makes more sense than a phone for a lot of people. On the other hand, if it's something where I'm quick in, I'm going to do something, I'm quick out again, maybe a phone is a better app. It really comes down to what is the user going to be doing? What are they going to be getting out of the exchange? And to the point about this notion of first screen, second screen, and whatever the heck screen. When I was back at Ball State, we were doing some work on this, and one of the students in the room, we were brainstorming some stuff, came up and said at one point, he said, so why is it the first screen? And of course, anybody in television thinks, well, of course it's the first screen, it's television, isn't it? And it sticks our chest out. But actually, no, the first screen is the one to which you are attending most closely at the given time. If I stop looking at that and I start looking down here, this is the first screen for a short period of time. And that's what we need to get our heads around.
We've got a question here in the audience.
So I was actually going to go to the point that Mike made earlier, but I want to leave sort of the question of what is first screen alone for a minute and ask the question of primary screen being the television screen. And from the standpoint of an advertiser or an agency, primary screen, so interactivity on that primary television screen is still not ubiquitous. And we talk about mass audience. It's not mass. And the question is, to the panel and maybe even to some of the members of the audience here, what are the barriers to ubiquity? Because I don't know if we have enough data on a mass audience basis to be able to say, is primary screen too late to the game? I think that the jury is out because the consumer hasn't had enough experience with primary screen interactivity. There's a lot of studies out there that say people want lean-back experiences. We haven't given them sufficient interactivity in the primary screen. So what are the barriers to that?
Yeah, let me take that by way of telling two very quick stories. So we launched on the CBS Early Show, gosh, it was back in the summer. It's been almost 7 or 8 months. And we had all the typical pains, right? Okay, star, we get it, it's not text. And then you'd have the talent go, simply text, star, and we're at home going, oh no, it's a phone call. So we had the typical user stuff. But over time, it was interesting to us that they used it primarily for voting. So they had this event, hey, we're going to send Dave Price, our weatherman, to one of 5 locations in the United States with nothing but $50, a cell phone, and a knapsack, and give the poor bastard 5 days to get home for Thanksgiving dinner. They put the star calling event up with the text message and the URL. And it was interesting, over time, what the talent did, literally live on this newscast, they started to realize, wait a minute, you don't even need to get out of your couch. You don't need to go to your computer. Come on, we know you've got that mobile phone right in your pocket. Just take it out and write star early, and let's go send this bastard to Anchorage, Alaska for the next 5 days and see if he can make it home. So that I thought was interesting in terms of, and they drove tens of thousands of calls at many multiples of what they got, frankly, offline through their URL or a text. But my other favorite story recently happened with Good Morning America. And by the way, I can't make this stuff up. It's interesting. You got to put this stuff in the hands of programmers, and they're the ones that come up with all the really good ideas. So GMA was using it for sending content. Well, that vitamin piece, we'll send you vitamin D information. And they realized the better the quality of the offer, obviously the higher the take rate. If you're going to give away an iPad, you're going to get thousands of calls or tens of thousands. But in this case, what they did is they connected the dots around 3 things. Contextual relevance around the content. It's Mother's Day week going into Mother's Day. And then they took a sponsor, 1-800-Flowers, which by the way is also an early Zoo customer. And they said, you dial star GMA right now during this live broadcast, and unlike Oprah, we're going to give all of our viewers, not just the ones in the studio audience, a coupon they can only get from us and our friends at 1-800-Flowers. So it was fascinating to me. They saw the solution to scale, simplicity of use case, proximity of the mobile phone, but the quality of the content and the offer and its contextual relevance to what the heck was going on the screen. And they had a really, really great experience because people realized, wow, you're telling me if I call now, I'm going to get an offer a la Groupon that I can only get because I happen to be watching GMA at this very point in time.
Great point. It keeps coming back to the basics. We have another question here from Lori Schwartz.
Well, this is more of a thought out loud, representing advertising. Yeah. Well, so my question to you guys is, talking to a lot of agency folk, I'm trying to explain to them that scale isn't actually that important because I don't actually believe that we're ever going to get there with all these different platforms, and that niche and reaching niche audiences is actually not a bad thing. So I'm just wondering if that has crossed your world at all, that if we can actually stop talking in the old way because we're not in that world of scalability anymore, and be okay about really reaching a smaller but more focused demographic. And then lastly, do any of you deal in the fact that we're wiring our children differently? They're different human beings than we are. I mean, my 2-year-old hits the TV because she uses the iPad, so she thinks it's going to move too. So I think we're actually going to be wired differently, and so I don't think a lot of our conversations about user experience are going to be the same in 15 years. So, oh, hey. So anyway, so the scale is the question.
Lori, I think you're absolutely, that's a great point about the niche thing. I mean, when I was at GSN, you couldn't have been more niche. How many people like game shows? It's a very specific audience. It's usually a little bit older, female-oriented. And we knew that. And that was okay because advertisers still wanted to advertise with us. So when we were able to offer that at the end of a campaign, which usually, bless you, which would usually go for about a week, that you would be able to not only get what your demographics were, but we would have them all the answers to the questions that the advertiser asked. So if it was a Burger King commercial, it would be like, what was, just first we have a retention question. What sandwich is being featured in this commercial? Then it would be more about the focus group question. How often did your family go out to eat? Different things like that. We would then give them the packet, and they were thrilled by that because it was a small little piece of a nugget of a sample audience that they kind of knew who we were going after. So scalability, that's a big question because you have so many different players involved, whether it's you got the network, you got the producers of the show, you've got the cable operators or the satellite or telcos that basically have to do things at the head end. So sometimes you try to keep it more, going back to simplicity, saying, how do I reach them easily? So there's a lot of different parts to that. When we did this one screen thing, I mean, I still can't believe we ever launched it when it came to like doing the deal with we had to do a deal with Time Warner, we had to do a deal with Gold Pocket, we had to get the producers of the show on board. It was really pretty insane. So sometimes I think back to the theme here is simple is better.
Yeah, Laurie, I think it's a fascinating question, and it's one we have to ask, because as we start to look at the kind of engagement metrics that genuine interactivity can deliver through television, where you have the opportunity to look not just at quantity, which is how media has been bought, yes, targeted, but nonetheless quantity, we have the opportunity to look at quality as well. And you talk to if we've had any experience of that. Back in the UK, I remember the car industry, automotive industry, got into interactive advertising fairly early on and did pretty well with it because they were able to drive traffic to dealers, test drives, information, etc. Porsche came out of the woodwork and started advertising on television. Porsche do not advertise on television because there's massive wastage. This is not like, a Ford F-150 or something. But they didn't mind. They put up with the wastage because they knew that for every 10 requests for information, every 10 test drives, they would sell a given number of Porsches or whatever. And that's fine by them. So they put up with the wastage because they were after a very discrete group of people within that who were very relevant to them, and they captured that data. Similarly, I did work with P&G brands around interactive executions on TV, and it was the data that they were capturing, and they were able to measure brand preference, intent to purchase, and all the rest of it among people that had seen the linear commercial versus and interacted with the non-linear commercial, and you're seeing very different metrics. So I definitely think it's something to explore. It's countercultural, as you saw from some of the expressions when you mentioned it around the room. And fair enough. That's the orthodoxy which needs to be challenged if we're going to see how we get the best out of this kind of stuff. And it's not a slam dunk by any means. But
We have
you know,
more
I agree with
questions
John.
queuing up out here.
Huh?
We have more questions queuing up out here.
Hi, I have a question about how you guys balance who has control over the user experience, being the creator or the consumer. So for example, with multiple screens, do you let the consumer decide, I want to watch this on an iPad versus an iPhone, versus have the interactivity all be on the same screen? Or do you have the creator dictate this needs to be done on a secondary screen?
But I'm not sure I got the question fully, but the user has to be in control. And it's about giving him the possibility to enjoy things or to engage experiences in the place that he feels comfortable with. Meaning at the right moment, at the moment he decides, in the context he decides.
But I think it's also an interesting question when you talk about this TV everywhere type thing, in which, you know, as a cable network, you know, the hub, our kids network, and you know, we do VOD, we offer all these different elements of where to find your programming, whether it's online, VOD, and if we want to have this interactive experience, again, you've got to build something out. So it's a bit of a challenge to say you can still have the same interactive experience on your iPad than you would having it if you're watching it online. So you got to build it. It depends on the technologies. And again, I think some of the things I've seen here today, with some of the things that people are doing, I think that a lot of those solutions are being, you know, dealt with right now. So I think that the answer will be, most likely, you will have to be able to do that. You have to cater to everybody.
So to follow on from that thought, if you can, as a developer, you should give the consumer the choice? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think if you can, if you want to, again, if you want to go back to scale and try to get to that wide audience, you have to make it very easy for them to, you know, engage in simplistic, easy ways with whatever technology
When,
they
where,
have.
and how.
Yep.
Okay. We have another question out here.
I deal with the 18 to 22-year-old demographic, and I was wondering, and it's an if and when question, will something else replace the TV as we know it as the primary display? And if the answer is yes, when, how soon, or how late?
I guess I would start by answering that it'll be a large screen, especially for entertainment purposes. But I think our nomenclature and definitions are going to get obliterated like they always do. You know, we use television. What is a Google TV, by the way? How do we classify that? As we taught in the past, it smells like a computer. It acts like a computer. It's web-enabled. You know, so to my mind, I think we're always going to have multiple screens, and the format is going to be, again, directly related to what the content experience is. Is it entertainment? Do you want to engage or interact with it?
I think we'll still have something that we call a television because we like our semantics. But I think the functions will change. It's still going to be a big screen. It'll become more functional. Right now, the television is the most primitive screen we have access to in terms of what you can do with it compared to anything else. It'll become less primitive and perhaps less televisual and more like the web, in the same way the web has become more like TV. But we probably won't stop calling it TV, and it won't stop looking like it does.
Right, and I think that content's going to play the big role in here. I mean, I was using something I was playing with Into Now, and I was watching what was trending, and it was a show called Firefly. I'm like, oh, I've never seen it, I've heard about it, so I put it on my iPad, was on a trip going back east, watched a couple episodes, oh, this is really great. Then I downloaded it on, and I said, I'll just put it on Apple TV so I can now watch it on the big screen. So I want to find my content now. The next aspect to that is how do I then start to interact with that? But you know, these devices, it's like the digital water cooler. People are starting to talk to each other with all devices, and that's kind of creating a new cause of things. Pretty interesting.
We probably only have time for one more question. I wanted to post a forward-looking question in front of you all, and that is basically, what is the greatest opportunity for this audience here and for all of you and your businesses in terms of a multi-screen business out there? What's the greatest opportunity?
I think we will see, inevitably we're going to see a multi-screen environment, and I think we're going to go in fits and starts to a point where we do get some kind of scale, not equally across all of them. The biggest business opportunity that will provide will be to go beyond reach, frequency, getting people to participate and engage in programming. We will start to realize the wealth of the riches of the data that we're able to capture doing that, and we will mine it, and we will find another value stream through television, which is currently much more associated with database marketing, with email and so forth, and not with television.
Yeah, I would add that the old adage, great ideas integrate themselves, and I think it's related to great storytelling. When you have a good idea, the integration should almost happen almost organically. The pieces fit together. There are some phenomenal examples that we know today, multiple screen, whatever you want to call it. Just look at what's happening with Facebook. I mean, television shows are taking on an entire life of their own on people's social graph. Brands are doing that. They're thinking about ways to engage users on any form of media or marketing asset and allowing people to post to their profile page or... So again, I think you got to be very open-minded and really kind of go with the flow. Don't force fit integration. And on the question on the advertising models, you know, again, as a CEO, I'm going to keep coming back to that. I don't know what the answer is, but I can tell you it's not the way we're currently constructed as agencies and marketing organizations. Because the model, it's not sustainable. The fact that we have people buying TV and buying radio and buying print in the future, I don't see that to be the case.
You know, for a while we called it, instead of interactive TV, we were calling it enhanced TV. And I kind of like that sometimes better when we think about you're enhancing that experience when you're watching a show. You know, you're giving a deeper engagement. And I think we're going to see the evolution of that 30-second spot because, you know, the way, I don't know about you, but the way I watch TV is completely different than the way it was 10 years ago. When I can DVR everything and I can bypass that stuff, you're going to start seeing more integrated ads, but they're going to have to be smart. And it goes back to that content. So it's not just about the content that's in the TV show, but how we see advertising. If you don't start to present that in a more engaging way, you're going to lose those people. So I think we have a really big opportunity coming down the way.
You bring us home, Olivier?
Yeah, well, I think that once it is designed in a very simplified and nice-looking way, the feedbacks are amazing. People are just loving the experience. And I think that the opportunity is not to screw up. I mean, the opportunity is just to design a better user experience for the premium content which is available out there. And this is the opportunity not to be missed.
So thank you all for entertaining us, and thank you all panelists, Joe, Olivier, Mike, and John. Thank you very much today.